Please do hydrate. I've never lost anyone yet from the stage, but there's always a first time. So we're going to talk about why our natural instincts make some people leaders and others just difficult. It was the Silicon Valley at the dawn of the internet era. I was a securities lawyer handling more client responsibility than any single person should in her first year out of law school. One particular client got the bulk of my best work, half of which I didn't even bill for reasons you'll understand later. And then one day, the partner I worked for came into my office and said, I just got off the phone with the client, the CEO, they asked for a different associate, they don't like you. Those were his exact words, they don't like you. It took nearly 2 decades, countless hours of research, reading several books, writing a couple books, and a much better understanding of workplace dynamics and human behavior for me to finally get it. They didn't like me because I was a woman. Oh, still am. More specifically, they didn't like the way my brain functions. So in about 30 minutes, you'll hear the full story of why a client who was not stupid didn't like the attorney that they said was giving them the best legal service they've ever had. And that will lead us into 3 small but significant adaptations that anyone, particularly women, can make to be recognized and rewarded more highly in their workplaces. But more importantly, adaptations companies can make to ensure that they are recruiting and retaining and rewarding their highest performing executives. But to get there, we have to start with a little history and a little biology. And it's okay if you don't know much about history, don't know much biology. I won't be speaking in the French I took, and you don't need a science book. But you'll see that what I say is true. And when you use it in what you do, we get closer to equality. So we'll start with biology. This is my dog. That actually is my dog. That's not some dog off the internet. I took that picture. I had that dog since she was 6 weeks old. That picture's always good for a little love. Which means everything that dog did is what I trained her to do, with the exception of the things that she came naturally programmed doing. So you're all smart people of the world. You've seen this dog in all kinds of jobs in life. What kind of things does she do naturally? Guard, absolutely. Guard, protection. We see her as a guide dog. We see her learning things very quickly. She knew everyone in our family by name. To the extended family, we could send them. I could say, go to Gina, and she would go find my mother-in-law somewhere in the house. That's the kind of thing that dog is good at. But there's another trait that no one ever mentions, ever. And it's right there in the name. What might that dog be good at? Herding. We don't ever think of it. But the German Shepherd dog was created in 1899 by a German scientist who was seeking to create a superior breed. Wait, what? Max von Stephanitz. He wanted to build a dog that was equally known for its loyalty, its beauty, and its intelligence. So he started with the herding dogs of the day. And he bred them so that they could be both soldiers and companions for families. That was the goal. The dogs that were bred in that process in Germany were sometimes used for herding, sometimes not. But the ones that we have in the United States are the ones that came back with our boys from World War I. They've never been used for herding. This dog has never, ever been used for herding. And yet, despite the fact that my dog is more than 100 generations removed from the herding dogs from whence she came, on her first birthday, this picture was taken. And yes, we took our dog sheep herding for her birthday. I live in Los Angeles and don't have children. But she's not hunting, she's not attacking, she was herding. That happened exactly 5 minutes after the first time she saw a sheep in her life. She herds by instinct. This is my dog's best friend. And once again, my dog has a best friend. I live in Los Angeles and don't have kids. What do we know this dog is good at? We can cut to the chase. Retrieving. Yes, and I bring it up because some dogs herd and some dogs retrieve by instinct. We're able to breed those instincts into dogs because brain activity is hereditary. Now, I can cite all kinds of scientific studies about brain activity being hereditary, but we can do an easy one in this room. Who here has kids? All right. Have you ever seen your children display a trait that they've never seen you do, but it's something you did as a kid. Because brain activity is hereditary. And so because of that, we're able to breed some dogs to herd and some dogs to retrieve. And we've been doing that with dogs to work with us and for us for about 10,000 years. We've been breeding instinct into humans a lot longer than that. And now we'll go to the history. These are your ancestors, Homo habilis. They were the first hominids. They're the first among us to walk on 2 feet and not be covered with fur. Habilis represented a giant leap forward in evolution. They did all kinds of cool things, but the coolest thing they did was they built tools. And not that they made tools. A monkey will take the leaves off a branch to make a stick. They built tools. They took a rock and tied it to a stick to make a hammer. Or they sharpened that rock and tied it to a stick and made a spear. Or they tied 2 coconuts together and made a bra. Maybe not. But we're going to be here a while, and she needs a little support. When you make a spear, you can hunt bigger animals. And when you can hunt bigger animals, you need more people. It takes more people to take down a woolly mammoth than to take down a meerkat. It takes more people to transport the meat back to your cave. It takes more people to protect the woolly mammoth's area where you're going to be hunting. And so habilis, in another leap forward in evolution, began living in tribes. So now they had a new survival concern. Instead of just being concerned about the survival of the individual or the survival of that family, they had to be concerned about the survival of the whole tribe. And survival, when I say it this way, means the biological definition. That doesn't mean just that you live. It means you live long enough to reproduce and you keep your offspring alive until they reach reproductive age. So again, for those of you who have children, if they've made it through puberty, congratulations, you have survived. So in order to survive, they had to make sure the tribe could reproduce itself. So if your tribe has 10 men and 10 women, and 10 men go off and fight in a war and only 2 come back, does your tribe survive? Yes, sure. 2 men with 10 women can easily reproduce the tribe, happily. Even if it's these 2. But if your tribe has 10 men and 10 women, and 10 women go off and fight in a war and only 2 come back, what happens? Tribe goes away. Yeah. 2 women with however many men cannot reproduce the tribe. And so the tribes that survived were the ones that pretty quickly figured out, don't let the women die. And we're all descendants of the tribes that survived. So what they did is they sent the men off to do anything that would cause instant death, which was hunting for big meat or protecting the cave. So here, see this guy over here in the end? Gonna die. See this guy here, he threw a stick. Like, what is he thinking? I threw the stick. Yeah. You can bet at the banquet tonight when they're eating that saber-toothed tiger, he's like, guys, I threw the stick. Yeah, we all know that guy. We all work with that guy. So they sent the men to go do anything that would cause instant death, hunting for big meat and protecting the cave. In the meantime, the women were back at the cave doing absolutely everything else. Literally every other task was done by the women. They skinned the meat, they made the clothes, they prepared the food, they cared for the sick, they tended to the elderly, they raised the children, they kept the fire burning, they fished, they foraged, they engaged in early stages of agriculture, they hunted for small animals. Women did everything except hunt for big meat and protect the cave and apparently hell the calves. I know, I took the picture in New York City. Maybe that is what he was doing. That transition into tribal living happened 2 million years ago. That number is extremely important because something else was happening 2 million years ago. And for that, I will turn it over to the preeminent brain science researcher in this arena, Dr. Dan Gilbert from Harvard. No offense, MIT.
Just 2 million years ago, something remarkable happened. The human brain tripled in size, and most of the growth in the human brain occurred in a new structure called the frontal lobe.
A new structure called the frontal lobe. So that transition began about 2 million years ago, but it took about 1.2 million years for the frontal lobe to evolve itself into existence. If you look at the fossil record, head sloped backwards. Now we all have this up here because our brains created a frontal lobe.
What does the frontal lobe do that made nature so eager for you to have one that it did a complete architectural overhaul of your skull?
what does the frontal lobe do? The frontal lobe houses our executive functions. It houses our emotional control, our social interaction, and our complex decision making. Not simple decision making like fight or flight, that happens in the amygdala, or more specifically, it happens when the amygdala meets the hypothalamic pituitary axis and engages the adrenal glands, but we don't need to know that. At the frontal lobe, complex decision making, emotional control, and social interaction. So this has to land because it's really critical. That part of the brain did not exist until after our survival skills were dependent on our gender. The part of the brain that controls our emotions, our social interaction, and our decision making didn't exist until after the men who were most likely to survive and pass their genes on to the next generation were the ones that were going to be most successful at hunting and combat. And the women who were going to survive and pass their genes on to the next generation were the ones who were most successful at the everything else required to keep the tribe alive. So we developed an entirely different set of instincts. Because brain activity is hereditary. So the men develop the instincts that would keep them alive doing this, hunting and combat. So what kind of instincts might have been developed? Well, number one, aggression. If the saber-toothed tiger is running at you, you have to run back at it. You can't run from it or you're not going to eat it, and chances are it will eat you. Next, competition. You want your spear to be the one that brings down the woolly mammoth. Why? Why do you want your spear to be the one that gets this beast?
Get the best cut of the meat.
You get meat, period. You get a girl. You get a lot of girls, which means what's going to happen? Your genes are going to be passed on to the next generation, more likely. Absolutely. And if you get the meat, who else gets the meat? The rest of the tribe after your family. So now your offspring is more likely to survive because they get more meat. So there's a lot of reasons you want to be the one who takes down the beast. So competition. The other thing is, did you have 30 minutes to decide whether you're going to throw the spear or not? Did you even have 30 seconds? No. So now, quick decision making. Quick decision making is part of that instinct for success in hunting and combat. And did you only throw the spear when you were 100% sure it was going to hit? No, otherwise you'd never throw your spear. Did you throw it all the time? Doesn't matter. Woolly mammoth might be there or not. No, then you'd lose your spear, and spears were valuable. So somewhere between, God bless you, somewhere between always throw it and never throw it is risk analysis. You figure out what the risk is and whether you're going to take it or not. So these are the traits that instinctively were being developed in the prefrontal cortex of the men who were most successful. Aggression, competition, quick decision-making, risk. And there is one more. And that is the ability for their brain to be completely at rest when not in use. Ladies, this is a survival trait. If you are sitting behind a rock for 2 days waiting for the saber-toothed tiger to wander by, you can't be making a to-do list. Did anyone here see the movie Wonder Woman? When they arrive at no man's land, they drop down into the trenches, and the first thing the captain asks the soldier there, "How long have you been here?" And he replied, 9 months. That was true. Soldiers were stationed inside 6-foot-wide mud trenches for 9 months. You have to be able to quiet your mind, or you will lose it in that situation. See, the reason women don't relate to this at all is we never had that luxury. We were doing everything else and responsible for the survival of the offspring of the tribe. And so you shut your brain down when you're responsible for a 3-year-old, what happens? 3-year-old dies, especially back then. So our brains don't ever do that shutdown thing. So unfortunately, we don't really understand that it's an important survival skill for the male brain. So like when a man and a woman are alone in a room together and nothing is happening, what is the worst thing she can ask him? I've never had an audience miss that. First time, every time, everyone gets it because it strikes fear in the hearts of the hardiest men because the answer is nothing. And that's fine. It means if we need him to kill a saber-toothed tiger, he can do it. But the point is, our brains evolved with different instincts. And this fact has been buried and hidden, and research on it has been unfunded for the last 50 years because it was originally brought out scientifically to be held against women. Charles Darwin was a genius biologist and a raging misogynist. His research was for the purpose of proving the superiority of the male over the female. And everyone who followed him, Gustave Le Bon, Topinard, they all followed that same model. Topinard was the one who coined the phrase, the active male and the sedentary female. They believed that the female was antithetical to evolution because the women were kept alive in order to reproduce, whether they could be survival of the fittest or not. They didn't realize there was a different set of fitness being developed for women. And Descent of Man was written in 1871. It wasn't until 1967 that this was challenged. And what could have possibly happened in the field of evolutionary biology to challenge this theory in 1967? A woman entered the field, Adrienne Zillman at Berkeley. Go Bears. I'm always hoping for Go Bears from the audience. Oh well. It happens more in California. Adrienne Zillman wrote On Human Locomotion, a Re-Examining of the Anatomical and Historical Evidence. A dry title if there ever was one, but when you re-examine the anatomical and historical evidence, you realize what they were getting wrong for 100 years. It wasn't the active male and the sedentary female. It was the active male and the equally but differently active female. We were just developing different survival traits. So let's go back to our dogs. Oh, no, sorry. So what happened is that transition happened 2 million years ago. 2 million years ago, we began living in tribes, our traits began depending on our gender, and our brains started expanding to be able to process all these new traits. And it was equally valuable to the survival of the tribe. But about 20,000 years ago in human history, something else happened. See, it used to be that the tribes would all go kill each other to take their resources. Some tribe with meat showed up to kill a tribe with salt to take their salt for their meat, not for flavoring, that's how they preserved it. They didn't have refrigerators. But at some point, someone in the tribe with salt probably said, hey, you know what? You've got meat, we've got salt. You're going to kill us. You're bigger, you have meat, but we'll probably kill some of you too. So why don't we do this? You give us some meat and we'll give you some salt. And nobody dies today. And the head of the meat tribe probably went, ooh, which I think translates to, that's a really good idea. They did that, and that's when commerce was born. So at about 20,000 years ago, commerce evolved. But because men were the only ones leaving the caves, men were only encountering other men. So as combat between tribes evolved into commerce between tribes, only men were engaging in it. And as this evolved into this, it evolved to reward all those traits that were the definitions of leadership in hunting and combat. Aggression, competition, risk, quick decisions. Whether it was the superior outcome or not, these were still the traits that defined leadership. So now, let's go back to our dogs. One herds and one retrieves, by instinct. I'm going to make everybody answer this question, so don't sit there and opt out. Which is better, herding or retrieving?
It depends.
Oh, it depends. On what?
The situation at hand, the goal.
By what do you mean by the situation?
What are you looking for?
Right. Are you saying, like, do you have a bunch of sheep that need to be rounded up, or do you have ducks falling from the sky?
What is the goal?
Right. That is an extremely logical and intelligent answer. It is completely wrong, but it is extremely logical and intelligent. No, let me give you a better parameter. The entire board of directors of Canine Incorporated are German Shepherds. And they're sitting around the boardroom trying to decide who's going to be the next CEO of Canine Incorporated. Now, which is better, herding or retrieving? Herding, 100%. In fact, it doesn't matter what the business model of Canine Incorporated is. It could be that the ducks fall from the sky and someone has to go get them and bring them back. If that is their business model, they will sit around the boardroom, assign that work to golden retrievers, call it scut work, and reward themselves on what amazing herders they are. And the only way a golden retriever gets to that table is to know how to herd. And to know how to herd so well and so effectively that it overcomes any bias against that retriever for being a retriever and not a herder. And also, don't bring up retrieving too much. That might make the German Shepherds nervous. Right? Herding and retrieving is a little esoteric, and it's hard to apply it to our real life. So let's talk about in real life. Which do we value more highly? This guy or this guy? One puts out fires, and one prevents fires from starting in the first place. Who do we value more highly? The one who puts out fires. Which is more intrinsically valuable to your outcome? Preventing the fire from starting in the first place. When I do this talk on college campuses and I get to this slide, I ask, who are you more instinctively inclined to want to mate with? But that sample set's a little biased. Yeah. But we don't have systems in place to reward the person who prevented the fire from starting in the first place. It's very easy to see who put out the fire. We always reward the person who put out the fire. We reward them even if they started the fire. But if your company doesn't come up with metrics for rewarding the person who prevented the fire in the first place, that person will get sick of not getting rewarded and they'll leave. And when that person leaves, what do you wind up with? A lot of fires. So as a company, look at the outcomes you want. Look at what you're rewarding. If you have somebody who is always 2 steps ahead of everything, who is more organized, who is fending off the attacks before they arrive, find ways to reward that person, because that person is more valuable to your outcome and rarely gets rewarded. So let's talk about the traits that as an individual you can develop if you don't have them to get you rewarded in your workplace, and also as a company that you need to recognize when you are over-rewarding them. The first is quick decision making. So I opened with a story of my client who didn't like me. What happened is I was in the Silicon Valley at the start of the internet boom, and law firms could not keep lawyers. It was crazy. The opportunities were too great. Every other law firm needed you. Every company needed in-house. You could go be an executive at an internet company. We were hemorrhaging lawyers. So everyone who left would get dumped off on somebody junior. We weren't qualified to do it. I'm not going to say we were committing malpractice, but let's just say we were doing a lot of things that were above our years. And I inherited a client from this guy, Rob, and I got their files, and they were a disaster. Rob had been practicing law by the seat of his pants, and it took months to get their cap table cleaned up, to get everything in order, to get them ready for another financing event. Now, that's the fun thing. When you're a securities lawyer, you want to raise money for your clients. That's why you're doing it. And so that's why they weren't getting billed. Like, no client wants to see cleaned up previous attorney's mess on their bill. So right when it was ready to do their Series D financing, that's when my partner came into my office, and he said, I just got off the phone with the CEO. They asked for a different associate. They don't like you. They miss Rob. And I said, but Rob gave them horrible legal service. And he said, yeah, they don't care. When they called Rob, he gave them an answer. And when they call you, you say, I'm going to look that up and get back to you. And I said, but Rob was wrong most of the time. And he said to me, doesn't matter. When a client calls, it's because they want an answer. Give them one. And he turned around and walked out of my office, and I thought that was the stupidest thing I'd ever heard. When a client calls, give them an answer? What if I'm wrong? Flash forward 4 years, and I was the VP of Business Development at an internet company, and I got to see what that process looks like on the other side. And it's something like the CEO says, hey, can we give stock for our Christmas bonuses this year? Or more accurately, the CEO says, hey, we're going to give stock for our Christmas bonuses this year. And some smart VP says, hold on, let's see if we can do that. And the VP says, let me go ask finance. They ask finance, can we have stock as Christmas bonuses? And finance is like, oh, that sounds good, but we don't know. Let's ask HR. So they go ask HR, can we give stock as our Christmas bonus? And HR is like, why are you asking us? We're HR. We don't know this. Call your lawyer. All of you have worked with lawyers, you know. That is not an inexpensive phone call. So they would call me and say, hey, can we give stock for Christmas bonuses this year? Now, previously I would say, ooh, let me look that up and get back to you. And then I would call them back within 24 hours every time. I thought that was great. I thought that I was giving them great service. But on their side of that phone call now, each person has to go back to someone they answer to and say, hey, our lawyer doesn't know, she's going to call us back. So then finance goes back to the VP and says, the lawyer doesn't know, she says she'll call us back. And the VP has to go back to the CEO and say, yeah, the lawyer didn't know, so we're hoping she calls us back. And now each of them has disappointed the person they answer to, and they don't even have the answer. They might have to disappoint them all over again. So after I was told, just give them an answer, I learned risk analysis. I got that phone call. And it was, hey, can we give stock as Christmas bonuses this year? And I thought, well, it's October. They're not doing it tomorrow. And chances are they want the answer to be yes. So, yes, click. And then I went and looked it up. That's the part Rob never did. And in that exact situation, turned out, oops, they couldn't. So now I have to call them back. And the first thing I have to do is figure out, who do I call? I'm not calling HR. I'm not calling finance. It doesn't do it. And I'm not going to call the CEO directly. Call the vice president. And when I had to make that phone call, this is exactly how it sounded. Hi, it's Valerie over at Brobeck. You know what? I looked into that stock issue a little further. It turns out you don't have enough left in the plan for that, so we need a board approval. I can do a board mailing. You can do your own board mailing. Or if you want, I'll write it up. You've got time to do it at the next board of directors meeting. What do you want? And the VP said, oh, we'll do it at the meeting. I said, great, I'll shoot this right over. Click. What did I not say on that phone call? I didn't say you can't do it, but more importantly, what did I not say?
Sorry.
I didn't say I was sorry, and I didn't say I was wrong. Because they're not sitting in their offices saying, damn, she got this wrong. No. In fact, what I said was, hey, you've got a problem, but I solved it for you. And when you solve someone's problem, you're the person who put out the fire, even if it's the fire you started. So when you get it wrong, figure out a way to fix it and call back and tell them you fixed it and never announce that you got it wrong. I don't need them going around saying, oh, she got it wrong, she got it wrong. Nobody's thinking that. Nobody is thinking that but me. What I really, really didn't say was, oh my God, I'm so stupid, I should have never told you that. Has anyone ever heard someone use language like that in your workplace? I'm so stupid, I should have never told you. Put your hand up if you ever heard someone say that. Okay, leave your hand up if that person had a penis. If you are a woman and you talk that way in your workplace, it is not your fault. It is not your fault that you say things like, I was so wrong, I made a big mistake. Because here's the thing, the workplace was designed to reward someone else's natural instincts. I never say a workplace is male-dominated, because that's not true. Men aren't out there dominating in their workplaces. It was male-designed. They were designed to reward natural male instincts. There are places that were designed to reward natural female instincts. Early childhood education in this country, the US was the first country ever to offer education to the masses regardless of their income or wealth. And so educating the great unwashed was considered extremely low-level work. And so women did it. So women got to design the entire system of early childhood education in this country. And what does it reward? Does it reward competition or cooperation in the early grades, K through 6? Does it reward aggression or consensus? Does it reward blurting out the answer as soon as you think it or making sure you get the right answer before you give it? Does it reward keeping your brain fully engaged the entire time, regardless of whether you're being in the direct line of fire? Because women designed that system, they designed it to reward their natural instincts without realizing that there's a lot of other instincts in the room. And that's why I believe personally that that's why little boys struggle in those K through 8 grades and little girls succeed. And then there's a giant shift in high school. Why? Because up until recently, education beyond 8th grade wasn't available to women. And definitely there were no teachers who did it. My own mother was pulled out of school after 8th grade because her father didn't think girls got educated past that age. So when we look at a system, we have to recognize who designed that system and whose instincts are being rewarded. So if you're a woman and you feel like you're doing all the same work and you're doing it just as well and you're not getting anywhere, of course you're going to start saying, okay, I don't know why I got this wrong and this is really messed up, but let me tell you how to do this. It's because you're swimming against the current. You're always swimming against the current because your natural instincts aren't being rewarded. And what happens when you're swimming against the current is you look over at the person swimming in the current and you think, damn, that guy's a good swimmer. I wish I could swim like that. And by the way, the one over in the current is thinking, damn, I'm a good swimmer. But if you're always swimming against the current, what kind of a swimmer are you becoming? Tired. That's why women are so tired. You're becoming a much stronger swimmer. And so we have to acknowledge that for ourselves. But if you're in a workplace where you hear somebody use language like that, feel free, take her aside and say, you know what? You are really good at your job. We really appreciate what you do here. You are contributing to our outcomes and you're very successful. So you don't need to go around announcing that you were wrong. You don't need to call yourself stupid because you made a mistake. Nobody here is keeping track of your mistakes. And by the way, studies have shown in workplaces, people do keep track of women's mistakes more than men. So make sure that's not happening in your workplace as well. But there are ways that women can present ourselves that just announce that what we're saying has value. And here's how you do that. You say, here's what I think. And then you pause, just for a beat, just so that everyone realizes someone just spoke, they can look up from their phones. And then you say what you're going to say. That pause has a second value, it slows you down. One of the things that happens is when we get nervous and when we get excited, we speed up naturally. And when we speed up, our voice goes up a higher register. And the human ear is conditioned to not hear higher pitched sounds as well as we hear lower pitched sounds. Again, everything from the neck up is about the survival of the species. Every trait we have was evolved to keep us alive. So, do any of us need to hear those birds chirping? Not really. But if suddenly behind the screen there was a low growl, hearing that might keep us alive. So if you're contributing, make sure you speak slowly and clearly and with a metered voice. And you do that for yourself by saying, here's what I think. Now, one of the things that happens is women also need to announce our credibility. We are questioned more and we are discounted more. So what we will do is we will say, okay, so in the last 5 buildings I worked on, we had this facilities issue where they couldn't manage the electrical bills very well. So we contracted, we brought in 3 new contract companies. They really gave us good bids and we found one that was a lot better. We reduced our price by an enormous amount. So I think we need to bring in a new electrical contractor. How long ago did you stop listening? Announce your credibility. That's really a good thing to do. It gets you listened to. Do it in 10 words or less. I worked on this in my last 5 companies. And here's what I think. See, now you pause twice. This is my area of expertise. So I know what we should do here. I have 4 degrees in this topic. So I've got a solution. How much more powerful did that sound? And I never tone police on women. It's a terrible thing that we're constantly having to monitor our tone. But it is held against us if we sound aggressive or abrasive. When you just say, here's what I think. Here's my expertise. Here's what I'm good at. Here's my solution. It just sounds confident. And here's an interesting trait. Confidence and competence in workplaces are perceived as the same. If you are highly competent but behave with no confidence, you are perceived as incompetent. And people who are highly confident can go years without anyone ever figuring out the truth. So even if you don't have it, speak with confidence. It is absolutely that you fake it till you make it. One of the other things I'm really cautious about is I never, ever tell women, behave like men. We bring so much value as women. The traits we are naturally good at, consensus building, agreement, getting all the facts before making the decision, those are highly valuable to the outcomes of companies. Companies need to find ways to see that those traits are being rewarded and recognized and brought into the workplace. So don't ever try to go to a job and behave like a man, but do everything you can to display the traits that will get you rewarded more highly in that job. And there's one more interesting instinctive difference between men and women that came out of hunting and combat, and that is an instinct for hierarchy. This says, lead me, follow me, or get out of my way. Patton, considered one of the great leaders of our time. That is almost the dictionary definition of leadership in almost all corporate structures. You're leading, you're following, or you're in the way. Where is the room for consensus in that? It's not. Women's instinct for social interaction was developed around a campfire, doing things as a group, deciding who's going to raise the children, who's going to cook the meat, who's going to sew the clothes, who's going to start the agriculture. And so we don't have an innate sense of hierarchy the way men do. This was a woman named Luan Brizendine did the definitive work on this, the female brain and the male brain. And in the male brain, she talks about a study at University of Michigan where they took 6-year-old boys, they put them in a room together and let them play freely with no supervision, no adults in the room at all. And then they separated them and put them in different rooms and asked each boy, okay, who was in charge? Who was most in charge? Who was least in charge? How in charge was everybody? Just make a list in order. And all the boys made their lists. And their lists were virtually identical after an hour of free play. So they repeated the experiment with girls, 6-year-old girls, let them play freely for an hour, separated them afterwards, said who was most in charge, who was least in charge, how in charge was each person. And the 6-year-old girls didn't understand the question. They kept saying, what do you mean? Nobody's in charge, we're playing. Women do not have the same instinct for hierarchy, and that hurts us in 2 big ways in the workplace. When I was practicing law, how many people, lawyers or use lawyers in the room? Because you might understand this number. As a first-year associate, I billed 2,800 hours. So I was leaving the office at 2 or 3 in the morning on the regular. And I had an assistant who didn't understand why I was in an office and she was in a cubicle. And one night I left at 3 in the morning. I left my timesheets on her desk for her to process. She got in the morning, but she had to be there at 8. I usually came in around 9:30 because I left at 3. And the next morning I got to my desk. I'm sitting there for about 5 minutes and she walks into my office holding my timesheets. And she says, hey, do you want me to show you how to enter these in the billing system? Sweet as pie, that question. And I sat stunned for a second, and then I kindly declined her kind offer. But it really started to bother me. Why would my assistant ask the attorney she works for if I wanted to learn how to do her job? So I asked around. Of the 14 male attorneys in our practice group, none had ever entered his timesheet into the billing system. We had a partner who didn't know there was a billing system. But of the 6 female attorneys in that group, I was the only one who had never entered my own timesheet. Some of them did it regularly. Some had only done it once or twice, but every one of them knew how. And again, I was like, why? Why would you spend a resource as precious as your time on work someone else is already getting paid to do? So the first answer was, oh, it's not that hard. Women do this to ourselves a lot. We take on work that's on someone else's list because we just want it to get done, or because we can. You know what? Cleaning my house is not that hard. I don't do it. But the other answer to my question was, it's just easier. And the translation is, God bless you, the translation is, it's just easier to do my assistant's work than to make my assistant do it for me. And if you asked the assistants in that group, do you treat the male attorneys and the female attorneys differently? What do you think they would have said? No way. And yet, no male attorney had ever even been asked if he wanted to learn how to do administrative work. And every female attorney had been. See, when we talk about different treatments between men and women in workplaces, we talk about hiring, we talk about advancement, we talk about salary negotiations. We never talk about the different treatment women get from subordinates. We don't talk about how exhausting it is to not get the basic level of support needed to do your job. Or if you get it, it's because you demanded it. And then what do they say about you? Aggressive, assertive, difficult. Why some people are leaders and others are just difficult. And there's another way that we get called difficult because of the hierarchy. So what happens in the ownership of the boss role is that we're always told this. Women are expected to be team players at a much higher rate than their male counterparts, particularly as they get into leadership roles. There's no I in team. You know what else? There's no BOSS. When you are the boss, do not give up your place in the hierarchy. If the person who's supposed to support you isn't doing that job, you don't do that job, you replace that person. Counsel them. But what happens is women get, if you are hired to do this, if you are the supervisor, it's her job to oversee what this guy does. And look at him, he's got this roll of cotton. He's like, what do I do with this? Do I pack it? Do I slap it? Do I ship it? What do I do with this? It is so easy for her to do this. And look how happy they both are. And the job's getting done. But now she has stepped out of her role in the hierarchy. And she has left a void, a leadership void. And the people above looking down don't see her over here doing his job. They see the hole where she was supposed to be. And this employee now sees, oh, if I don't do the job, my boss will do it for me. So women have to get much more comfortable owning our place in the hierarchy, saying, this is my position, I will do it. But the other half of this, as much as we don't own our place in the hierarchy, downhill, we're really bad at negotiating the hierarchy uphill. Because if a boss gives an employee a task and says, here, look at A, look at B, come back and tell me which is best. And so that employee goes off and does all the research and then comes back and says, all right, looked at them both, A is better. And the boss says, all right, we're going with B. If that employee is a man, he's going to say, you the boss, and leave. If that employee is a woman, she's going to say, oh no, I don't think you understand, A is better. And he'll say, yeah, but we're going with B. And she's like, no, here's the research. Here's the pros and cons of A. Here's the pros and cons of B. A really is superior. And then the boss is going to, I get it, we're going with B. And then she's going to say, but you're wrong. And now she's difficult. Women are 5 times more likely than men to be labeled difficult in a performance evaluation. Women are 17 times more likely than men to be labeled abrasive. If you disagree with your boss and it is not your decision to make, get comfortable with saying, you the boss. Now, I do this talk at companies all the time, and there is always someone in the room who's like, oh dear God, no. Please don't tell my employee not to disagree with the boss when the boss is wrong. And I say, then change your metrics. Figure out how to reward your employee for disagreeing with the boss when the boss is wrong. Because right now, all you're doing is penalizing that employee. The one who disagrees is the one who gets penalized, and that is much more likely than not to be a woman. There's a new trend, interestingly enough, I'm about to write about it, called the buffer boss. Has anyone heard this yet? It's where a female employee, you know what I'm talking about, a female employee is right and continually clashes with the boss, so the boss hires somebody in between them, creates a role. And it's happening. Happened to a friend of mine at Amazon. It happened to someone I know at Google. It happened to my sister in her recruiting company, where the boss doesn't want to hear it, so hires someone in. And I'm calling it the buffer boss. But not having an instinct for hierarchy, if it's going to work against you, become really aware of the hierarchy in your organization. If you run an organization and you're like, wait a minute, I don't want that. I don't want people's traits to be handled that way, restructure the hierarchy. Restructure it so that it's not held against anyone for being really good at what she does and not backing down. So all of this, everything we talked about, is in a book called How Women Can Succeed in the Workplace Despite Having Female Brains. It's to say that there are ways that we can adapt to our workplaces to be more successful, and there are ways that workplaces need to adapt to be more successful. We have now discovered that organizations with gender diverse management do 33% better in their returns. Companies, public companies with gender diverse boards of directors on average have 31% higher stock market value. Gender diversity is extremely important and extremely valuable to your company, but you can't get it unless you look at who you're rewarding and what you're rewarding for. If the only way somebody gets up to that table is to be able to herd, you lose all the value that person brings by being able to retrieve. If your team has 5 white guys from Harvard and you hire a black woman from Howard, that's awesome. But if the only way she's going to succeed is if you make her start behaving like a white guy from Harvard, you've lost all the value, because the diversity conversation we're not having is that diversity has nothing to do with a different skin color. It has nothing to do with a different gender. It has nothing to do with a different sexual orientation. It has to do with a different thought process. You don't get the value of diversity unless you celebrate diversity of thought. So figure out in your organizations how to encourage diversity of thought. If anybody wants to reach me, I'm at speakhappiness.com. Everything I do is about happiness. So speakhappiness.com. I'm going to end with 2 important points. 1, network, mentor, sponsor, and help each other out. The most important word on that slide is sponsor. Sponsor means you speak for someone when they're not in the room. Sponsor means you're the champion who gets them the promotion they weren't being considered for, or you're the goalkeeper who keeps them from getting assigned to the scut work. Again, there's one more story about my law firm practice where my partner, who never went to a single meeting in his life because he was the most powerful partner in the firm, went to one meeting once, and it was to keep me from being assigned to the worst possible time-consuming, low-level scut work that at once a year an associate had to be assigned to. When he said, no, I need her too much on my deals, she can't be assigned to that, it took them 20 minutes to debate who would get the job. It took them 5 seconds to say they were going to assign it to me and 20 minutes to debate who would get otherwise. Why? I was the only female available. It took 20 minutes to decide which man might get assigned to that work. So sponsor. Speak for someone when they're not in the room. And white men, here's a happy stat. When you speak for somebody who is gender diverse or racially diverse from you, you are thought of as a better leader. So do it as much as you possibly can. Sponsor people, give them opportunities, particularly the people who don't have anyone at your level who looks like them. They need you. So sponsor, and women, sponsor each other. What happens is you're the only golden retriever sitting at that table full of German shepherds. So you're like, I got this. I can hang with these shepherds. They're not going to notice I'm a golden retriever. And then another golden retriever shows up. And you're like, oh, now they're going to see me as a golden retriever. Or worse, that golden retriever starts struggling. And you start saying, now they're going to think I struggle too. You know what? Screw that. Go help that golden retriever. And then you know what? The next time a chair opens up, say, I think we need a golden retriever in that chair. Bring all the golden retrievers to the table. Somebody asked Ruth Bader Ginsburg, how many women on the Supreme Court would be enough? And she said 9. The other thing we can do. How many people here have ever sat at your desk and thought, oh my God, I'm a fraud? They're going to figure me out. Someone's walking in this room right now to take it all away from me. And men and women, I get it. Now, wait. Honestly, put your hand up if you've actually felt that way. All right, everybody look around the room and see who else's hand is up. How shocked are you? We look at each other like, you? You feel that way? The way the neural pathways work in our brain is that when you have a thought, the synapses fire and it travels over a neural pathway, it reinforces that neural pathway. It actually literally becomes smoother, faster, and deeper. It creates a rut on your brain to have the same thought over and over. So if you think, I don't belong here, and then, no, wait, I do belong here, too late. You already thought, I don't belong here. You have to have the positive thought to build the neural pathway. So if you've ever felt like you don't belong in your workplace, or you're not good enough, or you're a fraud, or they're going to take it away from you, right now, write down 5 things that are true about how great you are at your job and say them to yourself every day throughout the day. Build those neural pathways. Because when you believe you are great at your job, 1, you are great at your job. 2, you convey how great you are at your job. And confidence and competence are perceived as the same trait. So all of this I know, for women it's exhausting, and for companies it requires a lot of rethinking what you value and how you value it. But we have to do this. We have to, because as a company, if you don't do it, your top female performers are going to pack up their lady brains and go. If we work together to make sure that women, we start quick decision making, we present ourselves with a successful language, we acknowledge the hierarchy, and companies, we create metrics that reward the people who are contributing to our outcomes the greatest. And we make sure our performance evaluations aren't biased against a particular group of people just because of what traits they're displaying. All of us together will soar. Thank you.
You failed.
Oh.